At 06:11 a.m., near Saint-Fromond, Normandy, on 11 July 1944, the Jews still clung to hedgerows when the first German shell hissed past the orchard and punched earth behind the American tank column. Corporal Samuel Hicks, Hitchens, loader in Company B, 66th Armored Regiment, 2nd Armored Division, didn't flinch. Inside the dim steel compartment of his M4A1 Sherman, knees pressed to ammunition racks, spine curved against turret wall, he reached for a 75mm shell he had placed upside down in the ready rack, base toward him, nose pointing aft. Unorthodox, mocked during training exercises at Tidworth Camp, but now it meant no twisting, no repositioning, just snap, lift, slam into breech. "Load heat!" Sergeant Donnelly barked, voice cutting through idling engine roar and the metallic rattle of coaxial machine gun belts. Hicks jammed the round home, heart hammering against ribs. They had laughed in England. Nobody was laughing as a Panzer IV platoon materialized through morning mist. Someone in that orchard was about to learn that speed measured survival. Records would later show 5 enemy tanks destroyed in 6 minutes. The bridgehead held. At 07:02 hours on 11th July 1944, along the northern bank of the Vire River crossing in Normandy, the river smelled like churned soil and diesel runoff. A fragile bridgehead stretched behind rows of M4A1 Sherman tanks tucked among shattered apple trees. Company B, 66th Armored Regiment, had crossed the Vire 2 days earlier as part of Operation Cobra preparations. Hicks wiped grime from his eyes with a gloved hand. The Sherman's hull-cast steel, warm from the Ford GAA V8 power pack behind him, hummed like a restless animal awaiting orders. He cracked a canteen and tasted metal in the water. "I ever get out of here, I'm buying myself a farm without a single tree on it," he muttered to no one in particular. Private Mendoza, the bowgunner positioned forward in the hull, smirked without looking back. "Careful, farmer boy. You start talking dreams like that, you'll jinx us. My grandmother always said—" "Your grandmother wasn't dodging 88s," Hicks interrupted, but without heat. Outside the tank, riflemen from 2nd Armored Division's attached infantry picked their way through mud that sucked at boots with each step. Carbines hung loose on slings. Combat engineers had laid log mats across the slope to prevent 30-ton tanks from sinking into Norman soil, softened by weeks of rain and tracked vehicle passage. From battalion headquarters, positioned in a farmhouse with collapsed roof beams, a runner arrived breathless. Water dripped from his helmet rim. "Sherman Crews, report from Recon, says 21st Panzer Division elements probing east sector. Multiple tanks spotted moving through Saint-Fromond." Hicks tightened his harness straps. Tanks, not infantry patrols or half-tracks. Actual armor. A quiet thud of fear settled in his stomach like swallowed stone. And he thought, good. Time to test the loading method they had all mocked during training exercises. Hicks's unorthodox technique had started weeks earlier at the 2nd Armored Division staging area near Tidworth, England, in late May 1944. In the motor pool behind canvas tents that flapped in constant channel wind, he had rolled 75mm shells in his palms like a card dealer studying his deck. M61 armor-piercing capped rounds, steel projectiles with ballistic caps that glinted weakly in perpetually overcast British sun. He had watched British tank crews working on Sherman Fireflies, the 17-pounder armed variants, and noticed their loaders staging rounds with deliberate efficiency. They positioned ammunition like boxers positioning punches. Economy of motion, no wasted movement. So Hicks tried something unusual. He flipped the ready rack rounds backward in their cradles, primer end toward him, projectile nose pointing aft toward engine compartment. Less reach required, less rotation of wrist and forearm, straighter path from rack to breech. Looks stupid, Mendoza had observed, watching from the driver's hatch with skepticism written across his face. "Probably is," Hicks had replied, adjusting another shell. They had timed it with a stopwatch borrowed from the motor pool sergeant. Standard US Army loader technique as taught at Fort Knox, 3.2 seconds from load command to up confirmation. Hicks' reversed staging method, 2.4 seconds. Not official, not documented in any field manual or training circular, but 0.8 of a second in a tank engagement represented the difference between hitting first and burning. Lieutenant Blake, their tank commander, had humoured the experiment with characteristic patience. "Fine, Hicks, perform your backwards circus routine if it makes you happy, but you drop a shell during contact, I'll throw you out of this tank by your boots." Hicks hadn't dropped one yet, and today, 11th of July, the racks were loaded his way. Base toward loader position, nose forward into turret darkness. He had never wanted to be proven right this badly, or feared it more. Near 08:19 hours, morning dew evaporating into humidity that made steel surfaces slick with condensation. The orchard buzzed with distant MG-42 bursts, that distinctive ripping canvas sound, and the irregular pop of mortar tubes firing from concealed German positions. Inside the Sherman's fighting compartment, space contracted. Hot. The air smelled of grease, residual cordite dust from yesterday's engagement, and 5 men who hadn't bathed properly in a week. Hicks occupied the left side of the turret basket, Donnelly on the right behind the M4A1 gun mount. Blake stood in the commander's cupola above them. "Button up," Blake ordered as distant tracked vehicle sounds rumbled through hedgerow walls. "I don't like this quiet." Hicks pulled the loader's hatch closed above his head. Darkness swallowed the turret interior except for thin light filtering through vision blocks and the dull glow of turret position indicators. His world narrowed to ammunition racks, breech block, and the sergeant's back. Radio static crackled. "Steel 6, this is Steel 1-4. Armour movement observed, East Hedgerow, grid 422 Baker. Repeat, armour movement." Donnelly's knuckles whitened against the gun cradle. Could be ours, could be someone got turned around. But Hicks heard it clearly through hull steel, the rhythm of tracks, heavier than Sherman's distinctive clatter. German interleaved road wheel suspension had a different cadence, sharper metallic bite, Panzer fear, or if God truly hated them today, a Panther with its 75mm KWK-42 gun that could punch through Sherman frontal armour at 1,000 metres. A distant whistle, rising in pitch. Then the orchard erupted in fountains of dirt and shredded apple branches. Artillery, Nadelwerfer rockets screaming down in salvos that hammered hull surfaces like fists on coffin lids. Blake shouted over the chaos, "Driver, forward, slow, keep hull down behind that berm." Hicks felt the tank crawl forward, nose dipping as tracks bit into slope. He lifted the first round from its rack, smooth, practiced motion, heart steady despite everything. Outside, steel shrieked against steel. Someone's tank brewed up, fuel and ammunition cooking off in a roar that ended in screaming that stopped too quickly. Hicks whispered to himself, barely audible over engine noise, "Fast, faster than them." The hunt had begun. At 08:31 hours, a gap appeared in the hedgerow network that had divided Normandy fields since medieval times. Sherman tanks emerged from brush like cautious beasts, testing unfamiliar ground. Infantry crouched behind hull armour, scanning open fields with carbines ready. Nobody wanted to advance into what tankers called killing ground. Open terrain dominated by enemy anti-tank guns. Through his narrow periscope slit, Hicks glimpsed them, flat-fronted turrets, long barrels elevated slightly, Schürzen armour skirts hanging from hull sides, Panzer für Ursef. H models, judging by profile. Maybe 4 of them in staggered wedge formation, silhouettes jagged through drifting smoke from still-burning vehicles. Radio net erupted with urgent traffic. All steel units, Panzer formation, bearing 095 degrees, range 600 meters. Blake's voice, steady despite circumstances. Gunner, armor piercing. Up, Hicks barked, his voice already hoarse from shouting over engine noise and gun reports. The round seated perfectly. Breech block slammed closed with that distinctive metallic clang that meant ready to fire. Donnelly steadied the 70-mm M3 gun, squinting through the M55 telescopic sight. Target identified, lead tank. The German Panzer formation halted in unison, disciplined, coordinated. Their commander understood fields, sightlines, and hull-down positions. Professional soldiers who had survived multiple campaigns. A muzzle flash bloomed yellow-white from the lead Panzer's gun. The Sherman, positioned 30 meters to their right, exploded instantly. Turret lifted from hull ring, flipped once, crashed back down. Smoke poured from every opening. No one escaped. Shock slammed through Hicks' chest, then melted instantly into trained instinct. Emotional processing could wait. Survival required action. Fire, Blake roared. The 75mm kicked hard. Steel echo tore through Hicks's ears despite leather helmet padding. Recoil rocked the turret basket. He was already reaching for the next round, his backward staged shell sliding from rack into hands with clean metallic efficiency. No fumbling, no repositioning required. 2.4 seconds, just as practiced. Donnelly's voice tight. Hit! Turret strike, but he's still moving, still active. The 2nd Panzer, in formation, swung its turret toward their position with mechanical precision. Commander had identified their muzzle flash. They were targeted now, no backing out, no retreat, only speed and luck. Hicks' breath shook in his chest. They were in it now, completely committed. Rounds screamed overhead with that distinctive freight train sound that preceded impact. German Panzer Granit 39 armor-piercing shells, 75mm depth, travelling at 750 meters per second, cracked through hedge trunks and showered the Sherman with wooden splinters that pinged against whole steel. Inside the fighting compartment, pressure built like lungs trapped underwater. Temperature climbed. Hicks's uniform soaked through with sweat. Driver, pivot left 30 degrees. Gunner, acquire 2nd tank in line. The turret whirred on its electric motor, agonizingly slow, despite 24-volt power. Sweat dripped into Hicks's eyes, stinging, blurring vision. He slammed another round home with force, learned through hundreds of training repetitions. Breech snapped shut automatically. Donnelly fired. Recoil punched the entire turret basket. Impact, visible sparks, showering off enemy frontal armor plate. But no penetration. The round ricocheted skyward, defeated by German face-hardened steel. German optics found them. Tracer streaks from coaxial MG-34 stitched soil directly in front of their hull, walking fire toward them. Mendoza cursed fluently in Spanish, feeding ammunition belts into their own coaxial Browning. Driver cursed in English, blind in his restricted forward vision port, mud and fear making every movement uncertain. Radio static carried fragments of chaos. Panther tank sighted near Church Tower, grid 418. We don't have Firefly support. Use flank routes only. Keep pushing forward. Entire bridgehead depends on armor commitment. Hicks fought rising panic with mechanical routine. The M4 Sherman wasn't built to fight Panthers or even late-model Panzer IVs head-on. American tank doctrine assumed combined arms, infantry support, numerical superiority, not knife fights in hedgerows where superior German optics and armor mattered more than numbers, but they weren't dead, not yet. He touched the next round's cool steel casing, promise of survival contained in 50 pounds of metal and Explosive. Nose aft, base forward, he murmured like prayer. Grab, pull, seat, lock, repeat. The mantra kept hands moving when mind wanted to freeze. Outside, infantry voices yelled urgent warnings. Tanks, tanks flanking from Orchard. Hicks thought, let them come. We practiced for exactly this. Nobody's laughing at the backwards loader now. Nobody's calling it circus tricks. The loader who lived was the loader who moved fastest. Everything else was commentary for after-action reports. The U.S. Army Field Manual FM 17-33, Armored Force Field Manual. The Armored Battalion never imagined Normandy's bocage hedgerow country. American tank doctrine assumed open ground, maneuver warfare, massed firepower exploiting breakthrough. Here, knife fights through green tunnels, barely wider than tank hulls. Advance measured in yards purchased with blood. They crawled forward through vegetation that tore at every surface. Tank treads, climbing ancient root systems. Hull-scraping earthen walls, built centuries before combustion engines existed. Progress measured in meters per agonizing minute. Blake used his binocular sight system, voice steady despite surrounding chaos. We angle hull armor. We shoot first. We keep moving. Driver, 10 degrees right. Use that ditch for defilade. Donnelly, sweat streaming down face. I need faster rounds, Hicks. Half-second matters. Already am. Hicks' muscles burned from repetitive motion, shoulders aching, hands raw. His method wasn't magic, just reduced motion, reduced cognitive load. Hand grabs base naturally, lift in straight line, seat against rifling, slam breech, clear zone, repeat before fear catches breath. Muscle memory replacing conscious thought. Panzer rounds ricocheted off Sherman's sloped frontal armor, some deflecting harmlessly, others biting deep, penetrating outer plates without fully compromising crew compartment. One shell slammed directly into transmission housing. The Sherman's vulnerable lower front jaw. The tank shuddered violently. Hicks felt impact like punch to kidneys. Transmission holding, driver shouted. Still got gears. Gunner, fire at will. Roar, flash, recoil. Enemy tank lurched sideways, track disintegrating. Flames spit from vision ports as internal ammunition cooked off. One down, 3 visible targets remaining. Through clearing smoke, Hicks glimpsed German tank commander, gesturing frantically from open hatch, directing fire, coordinating his remaining panzers. Professional soldier doing his job. Mendoza squeezed trigger. The 30 caliber Browning ripped through leaves and steel. German officer slumped, body tumbling from cupola like discarded cloth. Hicks didn't cheer, didn't feel triumph, just grabbed next round. The war had no pause button, no intermission, only continuous action until someone stopped moving permanently. Outside, bazooka team dashed past their hull, firing at German SDKF Zer 251 half-track emerging behind hedgerow. Explosion, screaming, infantry war, continuing parallel to armor duel. Minutes blurred together. Or perhaps seconds stretched into eternities, time distorted under combat stress. Hicks' left shoulder throbbed from repetitive lifting. Hands raw. Knuckles bleeding from scraping against steel breech edges. Gloves torn through. Gun breech clanged open. Hot air rushing out smelling of burned propellant, gun oil, and sweat evaporating from overheated steel. Temperature inside turret climbed past 110 degrees Fahrenheit, despite external temperature barely reaching 70. He could barely hear his own voice over ringing ears. Up! Round seated, ready. Incoming shell landed close, too close. Tank rocked sideways on suspension. Dust rained from every interior surface. Hicks' helmet struck turret wall. Vision blurred momentarily. Driver yelled through intercom, "Track's still good. We're mobile." Outside, infantry pointed and screamed directions. Bazooka team dashed past tank hull, firing at German half-track emerging behind hedgerow. Small arms fire crackled continuously. Rifles, machine guns, submachine guns, creating constant audio backdrop. Donnelly breathed like boxer in 12th round of championship fight. Where the hell do they keep coming from? Panzer Grenadiers, Blake said, scanning through periscope. They fight integrated with armor. They don't break easy. Veteran units from Eastern Front. Hicks shoved another round forward, muscles shaking now. Adrenaline couldn't sustain this pace indefinitely. Human endurance had limits. The 2nd Panzer attempted reverse, backing toward barn structure for cover. Commander knew his vehicle was targeted. Fire! Blake's voice cut through chaos. The 75mm barked. Barn structure erupted in wooden splinters and dust. Tank behind it took hit to turret side. Turret lifted slightly on internal explosion pressure, then sagged at unnatural angle. Crew bailed from hatches. One man on fire, rolling in dirt, trying to extinguish burning uniform. Another crew member dragged him toward ditch. No time for mercy shots. War didn't pause for humanitarian gestures. 2 confirmed kills. Blake's voice held no triumph, just factual reporting. Hicks leaned back against ammunition rack, chest heaving, trying to catch breath that wouldn't come. Then through periscope slit he saw it. Another Panzer pivoting toward their exposed flank. Fear stabbed clean through exhaustion. He grabbed next shell. No hesitation. Not now, not ever. Smoke crawled across field like living creature with malevolent intent. Engine heat baked Hicks's face from power pack behind fighting compartment. Ventilation system inadequate for combat conditions. Blake, turn, hard turn, get gun on him before... Turret groaned on traverse gear. The Panzer's muzzle flash bloomed first. They were slower. German gunner already had solution. The shells scraped turret ring with metallic scream. Sparks burst inside fighting compartment like fireworks. Metal fragments, spalling from armor strike, peppered interior surfaces. Mendoza screamed, covering face with hands. Blood between fingers. Hicks ducked instinctively, uselessly. If shell penetrated, ducking meant nothing. But turret kept turning. Miracle of American engineering. Ring gear still functional. Gunner, send it, Blake's voice cracked. Loaded, Hicks confirmed. Shot fired. Direct hit. Panzer's armor buckled at lower frontal plate, the weak spot where hull met glacis. Vehicle halted instantly, turret drooping like it lost fight against gravity. That made 3 confirmed, but no celebration came. Instead, silence. Short, sharp, the kind preceding awful things. Panzer right, close range, 50 meters. Close enough to see tank commander's goggles clearly through magnified optics. Close enough to smell exhaust mixing with their own. Close enough that miss was nearly impossible. Also close enough that German couldn't miss either. Hicks's heart seemed to stop. This Panzer had perfect flank position. One good shot into Sherman's thin side armor, and they'd brew like that tank they passed earlier. Hatches warped shut, crew charred beyond recognition. He grabbed round, hands shaking now, adrenaline crash beginning. No mistakes, Hicks, he whispered to himself. You can laugh later. Live first, laugh after. The world shrank to single steel, cylinder, and heartbeat hammering against ribs. Nothing else existed. Not Normandy, not war, not survival odds or tactical doctrine. Just this round, this breach, this moment. Muscle memory took over where conscious thought failed. Hands moved automatically through practiced sequence. Lift, rotate, seat, lock. Up, voice hoarse, barely recognizable. Outside, German tank commander was shouting orders they couldn't hear, targeting them, 1 second from firing. Time compressed into crystalline moment where everything mattered and nothing did simultaneously. Time slowed. Psychological effect documented in combat reports where soldiers describe crisis moments extending subjectively. Breath thick in lungs, turret spinning, agonizingly slow, despite maximum traverse speed. Panzer IV's long-barreled 75mm KWK-40 aligned on their position like noose tightening. German gunner had perfect solution, range, negligible, angle, optimal. Hicks rammed shell, perfect fluid motion born of endless repetition. Up! On target, hurry! Donnelly barked, eye pressed to sight. The Panzer fired first. Sound like sky ripping apart. Impact, glancing blow, hull side. Sparks showered interior, spalling, tiny molten metal fragments, peppered exposed skin like angry hornets. Driver yelled in pain, forearm nicked by fragment, blood visible on sleeve. Blake didn't blink. Fire, flash, shockwave transmitted through entire tank structure. Shell-struck turret ring of Panzer, cracked metal like splitting bone. Catastrophic structural failure. Enemy turret froze mid-traverse. Crew scrambled for hatches, knowing vehicle was finished. Machine gun burst from Mendoza cut one crewman, down immediately. Two others fled toward ditch, survival instinct overriding training. 4 minutes elapsed since first contact. 3.5 by my watch, Blake muttered, checking timepiece. Hicks already reaching for next round, faster now, finding rhythm beyond conscious fear. Hands operated independently of thought. Then, another shape emerging through smoke. Turret profile longer, hull edges sharper, frontal armor more steeply angled. Wait, is that a Panther? Donnelly's voice cracked slightly, fear finally breaking through professional calm. Hicks's stomach dropped. This wasn't winnable head-on. Panther frontal armor, 80mm sloped at 55 degrees, shrugged off 75mm M3 gun rounds like rain off steel roof. American tank destroyers and Fireflies handled Panthers. Regular Shermans died to them. Blake, we flank. We move now. Driver, take us through that hedgerow. Full throttle. Sherman lurched forward, branches clawing at steel surfaces like skeletal fingers. Engine roared, 460 horsepower pushing 30 tons through vegetation, and the duel shifted from slugging match into desperate sprint for survival. In after-action reports, this would be called tactical repositioning. Inside the tank, it was simple terror channeled into motion. Sherman forced through hedgerow, engine whining at maximum RPM, hull shaking violently, suspension compressed. Ancient tree limbs, scraped external surfaces like fingernails on coffin lid. Equipment stowed outside tore loose. Panther fired. Round tore through hedge exactly where Sherman had been 3 seconds earlier. Impact crater marked their former position. Left, keep low, Blake yelled into intercom. Sherman burst into narrow lane, treads grinding dirt and exposed root systems. Vehicle rocked on uneven ground. Hicks slammed new round, despite violent motion. Armor-piercing ammunition wouldn't crack Panther frontal protection, but side armor, 40 to 50 millimeters, vertical, penetrable by 75mm M61 at close range. Tactical doctrine emphasized flanking superior armor. Sweat burned Hicks' eyelids, hands numb from repetitive trauma. Still working, still functioning, still alive. Hold fire until flank shot, Blake ordered. One chance, make it count. They crawled along ditch line, hull angled to minimize profile. German turret scanning wrong direction. Panther commander expected frontal engagement. Doctrine versus adaptation. Sherman crept forward like stalking predator. Hull down behind terrain fold. Wait for angle. Wait for geometry to favor thinner armor. Donnelly whispered like prayer. Come on, pivot just a little more. Turret reached position. perfect shot geometry, side plate exposed between road wheels and turret overhang, engine deck visible, vulnerable fuel tanks and cooling system. Blake. Fire for engine compartment. Immobilize him. Hicks exhaled. Hadn't realized he'd been holding breath for past 30 seconds. Shot fired. Hit. Sparks. Then belching flame through ventilation grills. Engine fire. Catastrophic for tanks. Fire suppression systems inadequate against sustained flames. 5 minutes, 40 seconds since initial contact. Longest engagement of Hicks' life. Felt like hours compressed. One more German crewman tried escaping through commander's cupola, collapsed halfway out, overcome by smoke or fragments. Hicks's shoulders sagged, body trembling from sustained adrenaline. They won, against odds, against doctrine, against expectations, or so he thought for approximately 3 seconds before mortar rounds started falling. German artillery observer had spotted engagement, response incoming. They were still very much inside killing grounds. Victory was temporary condition in war. Silence, deceptive, dangerous, the kind that preceded artillery barrages. Infantry voices distant, medics calling for stretcher bearers, engines idling at various pitches across sector. Hicks slumped against turret wall, lungs burning, muscles quivering. He reached for water canteen, hand shook too violently to properly grip cap. 3 attempts before successfully drinking. Blake scanned through binoculars, methodically checking sectors. Any more targets? Mendoza coughed, soot-coating face, small cut above eye bleeding slowly. Think we scared remaining units off, or they're regrouping. Radio crackled with battalion net traffic. Steel 1-4, confirm enemy armor neutralized in your sector. Blake keyed intercom. 5 tanks confirmed disabled or abandoned, Panzer IV variants and 1 Panther, crew intact, vehicle operational. 5 tanks, not 4. They hadn't even counted correctly during chaos. Numbers mattered for reports, but felt meaningless in immediate aftermath. Hicks chuckled, weak, slightly manic sound. We just bought the bridgehead 6 minutes. Then, whistle, rising pitch, familiar and terrifying. Mortar rounds incoming. Impact shook earth. Not German tanks now. German artillery response doctrine. Counter-battery fire against revealed positions. They were still very much occupying deadly ground. Blake. We move. Now. Displace before they bracket us. Can't die after surviving all that. Hicks tried standing. Legs wobbled. Knees weak. Body protesting continued demands. He had no victory speech prepared. No inspiring words. Just exhaustion. Temporary relief and fear waiting patiently to return at next contact. Driver revved engine. Sherman rolled backward, then pivoted. Tracks, bit mud. Vehicle accelerated toward rally point, where remaining company tanks regrouped. Behind them, burning German armor painted orchard black with oily smoke. Crows circled overhead. Scavengers already gathering. War's cleanup crew. Hicks leaned forehead against steel turret wall, whispering words nobody else could hear. Not bad for backwards bullets. Outside, infantry followed tanks toward temporary safety. Medics treated wounded. Engineers prepared recovery vehicles for disabled Shermans. War machine continued grinding. Forward. Impersonal, relentless, indifferent to individual survival. But for 6 minutes in Norman Orchard, 1 tank crew had rewritten their personal odds, 1 backward-loaded shell at a time. Afternoon, 11 July 1944. Smoke hung like theatre curtains across battlefield. Crows circled overhead in lazy spirals. Engine noise distant now. Maintenance crews towing damaged vehicles. Engineers clearing lanes through debris. Shermans refueled under broken apple trees that would never bear fruit again. Infantry rested in ditches, faces hollow, boots caked with mud that would never completely wash out. 1,000-yard stares on men who'd aged years in hours. Hicks sat outside Hull, back against steel still warm from engine heat, hands still shaking despite combat ending hours ago. Body processed stress in delayed waves. Donnelly emerged from turret, tossed him D-ration chocolate bar. Loader extraordinaire, you saved our asses with that weird technique. Hicks shrugged, unwrapping chocolate mechanically. Tank saved us. Armor held. Blake corrected, calm and tired, climbing down from commander's position. Crew saved us. Discipline saved us. That unorthodox loading method saved us. All factors mattered. Nearby, medic stitched driver's arm, where Spaulding had caught him. Clean wound, lucky. 6 inches different, and he'd have bled out before tourniquet could help. Knocked out Sherman smoked quietly 50 meters away. Crew already evacuated. Wounded sent to battalion aid station. Tank would be recovered, repaired if possible, or cannibalized for parts. Mendoza smoked captured German cigarette, staring at dead enemy tankers visible in field. Bodies would be collected later, identified if possible, buried with whatever ceremony time permitted. Feels wrong celebrating, Mendoza murmured. Hicks nodded. Guy in that turret had a loader too. Probably had same stupid jokes, same complaints about rations. Bet he thought he'd get home to some German farm somewhere. Blake placed hand on hull, gentle, almost reverent gesture. We did our job. They did theirs. Both sides fought professionally. No speeches delivered. No flags waved. War didn't applaud performance. It just permitted some men to wake up another morning while others didn't. That was enough. That had to be enough. Records would be written, numbers tallied, percentages calculated, but here in mud and smoke, survivors simply existed in temporary safety. Night, 11th of July 1944. Battalion command tent, canvas walls muffling distant artillery, kerosene lantern hissing, casting yellow light across field desks, after-action reports shuffled between clerks, typed on portable machines, stamped with unit codes. Paperwork reduced combat to clinical language, 11 July 1944. Company B, 66th Armored Regiment, 2nd Armored Division, engaged enemy armour near Saint-Fromond, Normandy sector, 4 Panzer IV AUSFH and 1 Panther Ausf. D, destroyed. 1 M4A1 Sherman disabled by track damage. Recovered. Bridgehead positions. Maintained. Estimated enemy casualties. 20-25 KIA. Friendly casualties 3 KIA, 7 WIA. No mention of Corporal Hitchens. No notation about loader shaving. 0.8 of a second off reload time through unconventional ammunition staging. Official record contained only outcomes, not methods. Just single line under crew performance evaluation. Commendable under sustained contact. Blake found Hicks near motor pool, cleaning equipment by flashlight, clapped his shoulder with hand that still trembled slightly. Tomorrow, same drill, we advance towards St. Lo. Hicks examined his raw knuckles, bruised shoulder, soot permanently embedded under fingernails. Tomorrow, more hedgerows, more rounds, more seconds measured between life and death. He whispered, "They'll never know. The generals, the historians. They'll never know about loading backwards." Blake replied softly, looking toward distant gun flashes. "Doesn't matter. We know. Crew survived. That's what counts." Outside, distant artillery grumbled like thunder arguing with the silent sky. Somewhere across Atlantic Ocean, farms without trees waited for men who had learned that time measured in fractions of seconds equaled survival. History wouldn't remember one loader's innovation. After-action reports contained no space for such detail, but Bridgehead held. Company B continued advance. And statistical analysis would later show 2nd Armoured Division's engagement success rates in Normandy Bocage exceeded projections by 14%. Small number representing hundreds of lives. War moved forward relentlessly. But for 6 minutes near Saint-Fromond, one tank crew had rewritten personal survival odds. One backward shell, 1/8 of a second, one innovation born from observation and necessity. The file closed without fanfare. The numbers had already changed the war in ways no one would ever document.